Ben, his wife Louise, and their daughter Agnes head off for a vacation in Italy. During their trip, they quickly become acquainted with the Patty family. Patty even takes Agnes on a motorbike ride, and they end up spending the entire day together, sharing both lunch and dinner. The next day, Ben and his family return to London. However, that night, Louise tells Ben that Sierra and Patty have invited them to stay at their countryside estate for a week-long holiday. With some persuasion from his wife, Ben finally agrees, and they set off on a road trip, arriving at the farm late at night, where they exchange pleasantries. The first odd thing Ben notices is when he's about to throw some trash away. He encounters their son, Ant, who seems mute and appears to want to communicate something but can't. At that moment, Patty promptly arrives and reminds Ant to focus on his studies. In honor of Ben and his family's arrival, a delicious chicken dinner is prepared. However, Patty's strange and overly familiar behavior, such as forcibly putting a spoonful of the dish into Louise's mouth, surprises both Ben and Louise. Louise ends up spitting the food out shortly after. Later, as they're about to sleep, Louise notices the dirty bed sheets. Ben reassures her, saying, "We won't be here long, darling. Just sleep on top of the bedspread." Up to this point, everything seems a bit odd, from Patty's behavior to Ant's muteness, suggesting that something's not quite right. The next day, Kiara enters their room and announces that they plan to have dinner at Patty's friend's house that evening, and that Ben and Louise are expected to join. They dress up in formal attire, ready to go, but Patty insists, "We should leave the kids at home because we're going to have a romantic dinner." He mentions that his friend will watch the kids in their absence. The situation continues to unravel, revealing a sense of mystery and underlying tension. They drive to a house by the sea and settle in for dinner, engaging in conversation. Meanwhile, Ant quietly leads Agnes to his father's room and shows her a special watch from his father's collection, seemingly trying to convey a message he can't articulate. Before Patty's friend arrives, he's forced to return the watch and leave the room with Agnes. At dinner, Patty begins discussing sexual topics and his marital relations with Sierra, making Ben and Louise extremely uncomfortable. Yet Patty doesn't let up and even asks Sierra to indulge in some inappropriate behavior under the table, seeking sexual satisfaction right in front of Ben and Louise, who can only laugh it off awkwardly. After dinner, as they prepare to leave, something strange happens. Patty's friend hands him the bill, but Patty and Sierra leave early, forcing poor Ben and Louise to cover their part of the check. A behavior that's just unacceptable anywhere in the world when someone's supposedly your guest. Later, Sierra and Louise check on the kids to find Ant and Agnes asleep. Patty opens the drawer to put his watch back and notices one of the watches has been moved. Louise, visibly upset by Patty and Sierra's offensive and inappropriate behavior, tells Ben she can't stand being around them any longer, calling them unreasonable and bizarre. Ben holds her and assures her that he'll try to get them out of there soon. In the middle of the night, Ant wakes Agnes but urges her not to make a sound. He lifts his shirt to reveal deep scars on his body, as if someone has beaten him severely, leaving Agnes deeply affected by the sight. The next day, they all go out together to enjoy the surrounding nature and have a picnic, with Patty starting a fire. Again, Patty's strange behavior surfaces as he roughly pulls at his son's clothes with a kind of wild aggression, incapable of treating him normally. When Louise complains about her neck hurting, Patty, who previously introduced himself as a doctor, comes over and gets uncomfortably close to her, trying to fix her neck in a rather inappropriate manner. Later, everyone gets ready to jump into a river for a swim, taking off their clothes. They all dive in except for Louise, who decides against it after watching Sierra jump. In the middle of the night, Louise wakes up to check on her daughter and finds her sleeping next to Sierra in Patty and Sierra's bedroom. Disturbed, she immediately gathers Agnes in her arms and decides to leave with Ben that very night. They pack their things, ready to head out, but as they prepare to leave, Ant waves goodbye to Agnes from the window. They hit the road, but Agnes starts fussing about leaving her doll behind. When they pull over to check their luggage, they realize the doll is missing, and in Agnes's tantrum, they almost have a near miss with a heavy truck. Reluctantly, they decide to return to retrieve the doll. However, they soon realize that this was part of Patty and Sierra's plan to get them back. Patty confronts Ben, upset, saying, "You were going to leave without saying goodbye. That's incredibly rude, considering you were our guests." Louise chimes in, saying she was uncomfortable with Kiara taking her daughter to sleep beside her. Ciara then puts on a dramatic act, explaining that she and Patty had a daughter the same age as Agnes who passed away, and they felt a strong connection to her because she looked like their daughter. This explanation seems far-fetched, but it works as a ploy to keep them there a few more days. Poor Aunt, who is mute, had just been trying to warn them to take their things and leave quickly, but Patty insists that Aunt is happy they're staying. Later in the kitchen with Ben and Louise, Patty starts confessing, "I'm not really a doctor. I do something else entirely. I don't even work. I brew and sell beer to make a living." Shocked, they remind him of his earlier claims of being a doctor, to which he replies, "Nah, I just said that to mess with you. Got you good, didn't I?" In the next scene, when they're having lunch outside, the kids try to dance together to a local tune. But here's where Patty loses his temper. Just because poor Aunt, the model that Patty likes, can't dance, Patty throws something at him and seems to lose control of himself. Ben and Louise tell him he better get a grip because Aunt is just a kid. After this incident, Louise talks to Ben alone again and urges him to leave this place sooner because she really doesn't like Patty's behavior. In the following scene, when the kids are sitting at the table drawing, Aunt attempts to write a few lines for Agnes to reveal some secrets. But when he shows it to Agnes, she can't read it because it's written in another language. As soon as Ciara and Louise approach them, poor Aunt crumples the paper and swallows it so no one can find out what he wrote. Meanwhile, Ben and Patty go for a drive. After observing Aunt's strange behavior, Agnes explains the situation to her mother, but stops when she sees Ciara approaching. Later, when Louise and Ciara are engrossed in conversation and everyone else is distracted, Aunt seizes the opportunity to sneak inside the house. He quietly tiptoes over to Patty, who is asleep, and carefully tries to retrieve the key from Patty's pants pocket. To avoid drawing attention, he then starts playing with Agnes using a ball, subtly leading her to a place that likely holds many secrets. They end up at what appears to be a stable, but there's a hidden door leading to a basement. Using the key, Aunt unlocks it and takes Agnes inside. Once there, Agnes sees that the place is filled with other people's belongings, all sorts of bags, accessories, personal items, and even various mobile phones that seemingly once had owners. Afterward, Aunt shows Agnes a photo album, revealing pictures not only of Patty and Ciara, but also of Aunt with his beloved parents. Aunt indicates that these were his real parents, and according to the photo, he once had a voice. Through gestures, he conveys the terrible thing Patty did to his voice and the cruelty he's endured, leaving Agnes deeply sympathetic towards poor Aunt. Aunt, terrified of Patty, tells Agnes not to mention anything about what she saw. They quickly close the door and leave the area. Agnes is determined to talk to her mom about it as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Aunt sneaks back into Patty's room to return the key, only to realize Patty is waking up. Thinking quickly, Aunt pretends to ask for water to distract Patty from noticing the missing key. He then hugs Patty, hoping to discreetly return the key. Finally, Aunt asks Patty to piggyback him, and during this, he successfully slips the key back into its place. Agnes, thinking on her feet, uses a thorn from a tree to scratch her leg, creating a diversion. She approaches her mom, claiming she's bleeding. Everyone assumes it's her first period, and she uses this moment to talk privately with her mom. Away from prying eyes, she shows her mom a photo she secretly took of the album Aunt showed her, revealing that Aunt's real parents were different people. This revelation deeply affects Louise, but she puts on a good act, telling Patty and Ciara that her daughter is embarrassed about starting her period and isn't feeling well. Later, in the privacy of their room, Louise explains everything to Ben. They brainstorm together, trying to find a way to escape this place quickly. They craft a plan, telling Patty that due to Agnes's health and her feeling down, they need to leave earlier than planned, while thanking Patty for his hospitality. Patty, with a sinister grin, agrees, although he insists they should stay longer, but he escorts them to their car. As they approach their vehicle, ready to make their escape, Ben notices that one of the tires is flat. It seems Patty had planned this all along, but he pretends to be helpful, saying, "Looks like your tire's flat, buddy. Let me fix it for you with my tools in the workshop." After fixing the tire, Patty mentions that Agnes's doll is on the roof, which doesn't seem accidental at all. He insists Ben retrieve it. As Ben climbs the ladder, he almost falls but manages to get the doll and tosses it down. Patty hands the doll back to Agnes. Finally, the moment to say goodbye arrives, but Patty, in an unsettling and inappropriate manner, hugs Louise tightly and kisses her repeatedly. Before leaving, Ben and Louise are forced to pretend they're thrilled to have Patty and Kiara visit them sometime, inviting them over with fake smiles. Just before the exit door opens, Ant looks longingly at the door, as if he wants to escape with them. But Patty calls him back, not letting him leave. As Ben and Louise drive away, waving from inside the car, Patty suddenly throws poor Ant into the water. Ben's instinct to save Ant, urged on by Agnes's pleas, makes him jump out of the car and dive into the water to rescue him. But in the blink of an eye, Ben realizes that Patty and Ciara have captured Louise and Agnes, threatening them with a weapon to ensure Ben cooperates, or else they'll harm his family. In the next scene, under the threat of a gun, Patty and Ciara force Louise and Ben to transfer all their financial assets into their account. Afterward, Patty prepares a syringe, likely with sinister intentions for Louise. However, Louise found a box cutter earlier and uses it to slash Patty across the face. In the chaos that follows, she seizes the gun from Ciara, threatening them not to follow her, and swiftly rescues Ben and the kids. They all rush to the car, ready to finally escape. But just as they're about to leave, Mike, Patty's friend they met earlier, appears. He fires his shotgun at their car window, forcing them to retreat and quickly barricade themselves inside the house, locking all doors and windows. Meanwhile, outside, Patty slaps Ciara across the face and, in a twisted, deranged manner, kisses her. It's a disturbing mix of violence and affection. Inside, Ben and Louise use heavy furniture, including a piano, to block the doors. Mike, however, manages to open a door Louise had locked behind Patty and Ciara, freeing them. Ciara's first move is to cut the house's power, plunging everything into darkness. Using their phones for light, Ben and Louise search for a solution. Patty, from outside, fires a warning shot into the air, threatening to kill them all. In response, Louise and Ben attempt to make Molotov cocktails. Just as they're about to throw one out the window, Mike shoots at them, thwarting their plan. Nevertheless, Ben throws a Molotov cocktail, and though it doesn't reach its intended target, realizing the danger, Ben and Louise find a safe spot for the kids to keep them protected. Meanwhile, the Molotov cocktail that Ben threw has landed on Mike's car, igniting it in flames. Ben notices Patty outside the window, threatening them. Meanwhile, Mike finds his way in through the window using a ladder, and in the blink of an eye, Patty enters the house, making threats. Patty heads toward the door blocked by the piano. Louise tries to stop him, but Patty fires a few shots, forcing Louise to retreat. Finally, Patty kicks the door open. At the same time, Ben lies in wait for Mike and tries to attack him from behind with a hammer. However, he fails to land the blow correctly. Ben finds himself in a terrifying situation where he might be killed at any moment, but Louise comes to the rescue and delivers an incredible finishing blow to Mike's head with the back of the hammer, sending him straight to hell. Patty enters a room where the kids are hiding in one of the closets. To distract Patty, they left a phone inside one of the closets. Patty opens the door, only to find the phone, with no sign of the kids. Louise, lying in wait, pours a horrible acid on Patty's face, allowing the kids to escape. Kira arrives and tries to wash Patty's face in the bathroom. In the next scene, as Louise and the kids attempt to escape down the ladder from the window with Ben's help, they are caught off guard by Ciara, who threatens them with a gun. But Louise, with the courage of 100 men, hits her with a brick, causing Ciara to lose balance and fall, seriously injuring herself and passed out. The noise infuriates Patty. Due to Ciara's fall, Agnes also loses her balance, but her father saves her. He sacrifices himself by jumping to the ground to fix the ladder so everyone can get down. Just as Louise reaches the ground, they hear Patty's voice. To their surprise, it turns out to be a small fox. Suddenly, they see Patty behind them, holding their daughter Agnes hostage. Louise pleads with him not to harm her daughter. At that moment, Agnes injects Patty with a syringe he had intended for Louise, paralyzing him instantly, and Agnes is saved. Ben generously walks past Patty, despite everything he's been through, and decides to leave him be. But that's not enough for our unfortunate boy Ant, who has suffered the worst at the hands of Patty, including the murder of his parents. With a glance at Ben, as if seeking permission for revenge, Ant picks up a stone from the ground and repeatedly strikes Patty, avenging his parents' murder and his own misery. In the end, they all drive away, their faces showing the toll of having survived a real hell. The film ends with a shot of innocent Ant, tears welling in his eyes.